Hello and welcome. This is Enlightened Connections, a space where unseen threads are illuminated between people and spirit, between animals and their humans, and between the everyday and the extraordinary. I'm your host, Lisa Aston Michael, medium, healer, and animal communicator. And I invite you each week to join me as I share conversations and practices that bring light, healing, and connection into your world. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This week I am not only quite excited, but I feel quite honoured for my guest. This week is Graeme Kapono Urlich. And I'm not going to get too much into the meaning of the Kapono at this stage, because it'll unpack as we go through this interview. But I just want to give you some background. Graeme was born and raised in rural New Zealand, and he had an early exposure, of course, to Maori stories and traditions, which sparked a lifelong curiosity for esoteric wisdom and healing. His path led him from studying tarot and the I Ching to hands-on healing modalities, including intuitive massage, reflexology, shiatsu, and Hawaiian temple-style Lomi Lomi, which he began training in 1998 under Hawaiian master Abraham Kauai. In 1990, Graeme began his long-standing training with Huna International, and we're going to speak a bit about that today. And the Huna philosophy became the missing link that unified his decades of study and practice. Graeme is now ordained as an Alakaʻi of Huna International since 1994, and he has taught Lomi Lomi and Huna internationally for many years. Today, he continues his dedicated service as the media director for Huna International, sharing ancient Hawaiian wisdom in accessible and empowering ways. Welcome, Graeme.
Aloha.
Aloha to you too. This is to me, a very unique field that you work in, because I'm not sure how many Aussies or how many of our listeners actually know about Huna Kapua, Huna International. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Well, Huna International was started by Serge Kahili King in 1973, and his father was adopted into a Hawaiian family, the Kahili family. Not sure exactly when, but quite a long time ago. And he was trained in this lineage, this family tradition of kupua, which is the shaman tradition of Hawaii. And so a master of this tradition would be a kahuna kupua. And there's a lot of misunderstanding of a lot of these words, so not to get into too much detail. A kahuna is simply an expert in a specific field of knowledge. So you would have a kahuna shaman, kahuna herbalist, which is the La'au Lapa'au. Abraham Kauai, who I trained with from 1988, called himself a kahuna Lapa'au, which he translated to mean to shape and move energy. He taught the Lomi Lomi, the temple-style Lomi Lomi, that he learnt from the grandmother of a friend of mine in Hawaii. And he didn't teach Lomi Lomi. He always said he wasn't teaching Lomi Lomi, but he was using Lomi Lomi to teach something deeper. And it was more about navigation and not necessarily finding places, but navigating through life.
Okay, so I can understand a little better what these descriptions mean. What exactly is Lomi Lomi, and can you tell me, is this similar in terms of, you mentioned the word shaman, and I'm wondering, is this a similar pathway in terms of what we understand as shamanism traditionally, or is this more like Reiki in terms of energy healing? Where does this sit?
Well, That's a big subject in itself. When we say the word shaman, and kupua is an almost direct translation of kupua. Kala kupua is the craft, and we shorten that to kupua to mean the practitioner. And kala kupua, one of the meanings is magic. So the real magic that we're working with is the use of energy and emotions and the mind to create change.
Is that change in the mind, the body, and the spirit?
Yeah. Well, the distinction is, and there are crossovers. The bodywork comes from priesthood traditions, and Abraham was from a priesthood tradition, which is more warrior in its focus. The herbalists are more the technicians. They had Kahuna surgeons. They had all sorts of different things, but the herbalist is using the properties of the herb to create the change that the person wants. Whereas the shaman might use the same herb for the same condition, but he's using it more for the ritual of using it and the symbology of it to influence a change in thinking and belief, which changes behavior, which changes outcomes and results. And all Hawaiian healing is based on the idea that ma'i, illness, is a state of high tension in the body, causes breakdown, and that usually comes from a conflict in belief and experience. And so all healing involves a releasing of tension to allow the body to heal itself. So the shaman works primarily with the mind, but the priesthood traditions and the herbalists would work primarily with the body.
Okay.
So that's the distinction. And we're borrowing a word from the Russian Tungusic people. And they happen to be the people that the anthropologists studied first. And they encountered this type of healer, a specific kind of healer, that using the mind and behavior to change outcomes. And that got mixed in with a whole lot of other similar things from the Mongols and the Briat and different people around that region. And then, of course, that got translated to all sorts of different traditions around the world that it didn't really apply to. So you might find a medicine man in American Indian tradition referred to as a shaman. Well, yes, some medicine men would be shaman, but not all medicine men are shaman. So a shaman might be a medicine man, but not all medicine men are shaman. So it's a difficult distinction, but there's a whole lot of stuff these days that is called shamanic that's not really by that strict definition and the definition we would use in the Hawaiian tradition. That's not a criticism of anything that people will call that. And in Huna we say if it works, it's Huna. So we have a lineage and a craft, but the acknowledgement is that everybody's different. And we need to remember that in the old days where this knowledge comes from, there wasn't a huge mixing of cultures and beliefs and traditions that we have today, because there's a lot more communication today. So we train in this tradition to be urban shaman. So because that's urban areas are where most of the healing is needed today. So we can't sit down with a drum in the middle of the shopping mall and do a healing ritual. That's not appropriate. There's lots of ways that we can work in those environments. And we train basically to work with the mind alone. We don't need the drumming. In fact, shaman typically very rarely use drumming. But today that's considered very shamanic.
Yes.
But it's a tool that we might use, but it's not the core of what we do. And in this tradition, in the adventurer way of working, because we're an adventurer tradition, we treat illness as a behavior and circumstance as behavior, whereas a warrior might see it as something that's invaded that has to be cast out.
Right. I actually understand that.
And there's a lot of things that are done today in Western culture that doesn't have that cultural foundation and knowledge base.
We're so distanced in Western culture. I know that our allopathic, and again, this is not any criticism or comparing apples to oranges, but I know our allopathic system has only been around fairly recently and is very heavily prescription-based, drug-based, altering the natural or normal structure of the cells in the body. And the ancient arts or the ancient healing modalities, as you're talking about, their intention is to focus on the power of the body itself and the power of the human mind itself to change or to heal or to deconstruct and reconstruct its metabolic system. Would that be right?
I have seen instances where a broken bone has healed overnight. I have seen an instance of a breast tumor, cancer tumor, disappear in 4 hours. Both people I know personally and have worked with personally. But we don't rule out the allopathic.
No, there's a place for everything. Yeah.
There's a place for everything. And if the individual has a very, very strong belief in something, we don't try and instill a new belief. We help them to make that belief work better for them. Or to help them change it if they choose to. Because even in the warrior traditions in Hawaii and the adventure traditions, when someone was ill, it was not just the individual person, their beliefs, their complexes that they worked with. It's the whole environment and the whole family. And ho'oponopono is a word that's very misused today as well. It's not 4 statements that magically fix everything. It was a conflict resolution process because harmony in the family group was fundamental to survival.
Does this include ancestral lineage, or are you talking about the direct environment in the physical?
Well, ancestral lineage is part of the direct environment because ancestors aren't out there somewhere. Because in Hawaiian language, there's no past or future tense. Everything is now. It's a very different way of relating to now, to what we're experiencing. So the ancestors, there's lots of symbology, like the Aumakua, family Aumakua might be an owl or a dolphin or a shark or a plant even, as a family guardian. That was often considered symbolic of the ancestors, but the ancestors are in here, in genetic memory.
Okay.
And what we're doing now, our present moment focus, tends to activate or deactivate certain genetic memories. And that was the focus of the original Hawaiian temple massage. There was not a healing process in that way. Lomi Lomi covers a wide range of different techniques. But the Lomi Kapalele, as Abraham used to call it, was a rite of passage for children of high rank and in the temples to awaken genetic memory so they had the best, most knowledgeable and most effective leaders that they could have. So a kahuna might go through this process. But to work, and 99% of what a shaman does, particularly in this tradition, is simple counselling. To ask questions of the person as to why they feel a particular way or behave a particular way, and to open up the thinking to new ideas and new choices and new possibilities for them to move forward.
That's very interesting because that to me is the shamanic aspect of helping someone heal themselves.
That's exactly what we do. We want to empower the person and encourage them to heal themselves. We're only helpers. We can't heal them. We can do things that have a temporary effect, but unless they change the pattern that's creating the tension in the first place, it will just come back. They come back in different ways, and not everyone's going to manifest the same source of tension in the same way.
And it's incredible when you think that whatever happens to you during the process of physical life is pretty much an illusion anyway, because it's just passing through. And, perhaps when we hold on to things, hold on to events, hold on to circumstances, hold on to grief or hold on to stresses, does it then manifest itself as something far more insipid rather than recognizing that happened, that's an event, that's life, it's passing through?
Well, there is a very good video we have a YouTube channel with about 500 videos on it at the moment. And one of them is talking specifically about PTSD and dwelling in the past. And because of this present moment focus in the language, the past is memory and the future is potential depending on what we choose now. So they didn't really have, with this present moment focus, they didn't really have this resistance to something that happened in the past.
Hmm.
So with PTSD or trauma, however you want to call it, it's typically something that's happened and stress is causing them to hang on to that behavior that it's developed and often progressing it, making it worse. But the primary process that's involved here is that the person really does not want this thing to have happened.
Right.
And they're resisting the fact that it has happened.
And what you resist persists.
What you resist persists. And perhaps it's a good time to go through the 7 principles that we use as a framework to work with people and to work with problems or situations that we want to create change in. So the first principle is that the world is what you think it is. And the Hawaiian word we use for that is ike, which is a very broad word. Hawaiian's a very metaphorical language, and some words, depending on the context they're used in, can have 20, 25 different meanings. And so the first one we use is ike, and that's the world is what we think it is. And the trick with this one is that the world is also not what you think it is, because other people think it's something different. Everybody has variations. And we're creating our experience of reality, not creating all of reality. And we don't treat it as an illusion, but we do treat it as a dream. But the effects we get are what we experience. So that's our reality. That's real for us. Depending on your purpose, for instance, the rain might be great for your garden, but terrible for your picnic.
All right.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So we work with it that way. What are we actually thinking about a situation or something or someone? And is that helping us or getting in the way of what we want to be experiencing? The second principle we work with is kala, and that means that there are no limits. So that means that everything is possible if we can figure out how to do it.
Are you talking about manifesting the unseen, or are you talking about nothing's impossible to do?
Nothing's impossible to do. So, and it also means that everything is connected to everything else. And you mentioned unseen there before. A lot of people have this concept of a spiritual realm that's separate from the physical realm. We don't have that concept. There's one realm, parts of it that are seen or experienced, which is ao, the outer world, and po, which is the inner world, which simply means the parts that we don't consciously see. And like the wind is in po because we can't see it, but we can see the effects of it.
Right.
We only see the effects of the wind. We don't see the wind itself. So there's a distinction there. There's no separation. There's no veils. And that's one of the meanings of huna is hard to see or not obvious. Some people translate it as being the secret, but that's a different word. That's huna, which is a different pronunciation. Looks the same on the page, except there's a macron over the second A. And that does mean concealed and hidden and deliberately obscured from view. But huna, in terms of the philosophy and the esoteric knowledge, doesn't mean that. It just means not obvious. So you have to learn the skills in order to be able to see more of the unseen. And that's when you master that, that's where you'll start to use the term kahuna. But culturally, we don't use that anymore. Very few people will call themselves a kahuna for various reasons. So there is this concept of no limits, everything's possible. It's an infinite universe. and we exist everywhere in all of it. We're infinite as well. But we need to be able to gain the knowledge and the confidence and the skill to do some things that we can't currently do. And there's this idea that everything is connected to everything else all of the time. There's no separation. And a corollary of this principle, or a paradox, some people would say, is that limits are useful. So if you want to play chess, a board, particular shape and size, and particular pieces, gives you the ability to play chess. If you want to play checkers, you can use the same board, but you have to use different pieces. We have these ideas in life that we can choose limits that help us focus on the goal that we have in mind instead of trying to do everything. We set a limit, a goal, an outcome, and we focus on that. And that brings us to the third principle, which is makia. Energy flows where attention goes. So a lot of focus on a goal creates a lot of progress along that pathway. A little bit of focus creates a little bit. But a scattered focus, our attention's drawn all over the place and we don't stay focused and we don't tend to achieve that goal. So energy flows where attention goes, but also attention goes where energy flows. So if somebody over here is making a lot of noise or doing something very energetic, wow, our focus will be moved.
I think that technique is used very cleverly by, say, for example, the media gives,
very much so. Very much so.
It's very, or it's like, that experiment of standing at the bottom of a building and looking up. There's actually nothing you're looking at, but just try it. The next thing you know, everybody else is gathering around looking up at the same thing and there's still nothing there, but it's easy to distract people, isn't it? It's very, very simple to distract.
It is. And I was actually watching a Dr. Phil video yesterday about this kind of thing, where they did experiments where they had 10 people in a room and they had 9 actors to set this up and then one subject. And there was a multiple choice question with a very obvious correct answer. But the 9 people chose one of the false answers. And 100% of the time, the subject chose the false answer.
Wow.
So we can convince ourselves through confirmation bias that something's true when it's not really.
I wonder how much of that also was that one person feeling not confident to speak out, saying, oh, I actually know the right one, but for some reason they're all saying the wrong one. I don't want to be the black sheep here. I want to...
That's 100% what it is. Rejection is our greatest fear. Not belonging is a primary driving force for a human being. We're social animals. So being outcast, and back in history, when I was saying about Ho'oponopono was about survival, being outcast, and that was a consequence of not agreeing to come back into harmony in the Hawaiian family in the old days. If someone absolutely refused to reach an accommodation, a compromise to create harmony, they were cast out, they were banished, meant death.
That usually meant death. Wow. And it's not that dissimilar now in our modern, Western culture. It's if you dare stand up and speak out opposite to, the way the salmon are swimming, you can very much feel a loner. And I think social media, for example, has exacerbated or extrapolated that, hasn't it? If you have a unique opinion, you'll very soon find out if the pack don't agree with it. What happens? Yeah. You're isolated. Yeah.
Cancel culture has become very prominent, and being offended has become a very high badge of honor. And it's very much misguided and programmed in most cases. Yeah, and so that's why it's not very widely known, this Huna philosophy from Hawaii and this tradition, particularly the adventurer way of thinking, because it really empowers the individual to be who they want to be.
I love that.
And we'll get to it a little bit soon. The fourth principle is manawa. and that says, now is the moment of power. So again, very much this present moment focus. And it's not just this second or this instant. If you have a goal and a process that's going to take a year, and you stay in that focus and walking that path, the present moment is that whole year. So yeah, staying, now is the moment of power. And when we're fully present, that's when we are most relaxed. That's when we have our most available energy, the least tension, and the most confidence is when we're fully present here and now. And an example of that is something with the Lomi Lomi. When I was training with Abraham, he always used to say, if you can do this nonstop for 24 hours, you're no longer a beginner. He didn't say you'd mastered it. He said, you're no longer a beginner. And I sort of, because the world is what you think it is, I kind of thought, well, okay, he's going to be saying that for a reason. I'm not going to dismiss that straight away. But then, I was lucky enough to go from here to the UK. And I basically introduced Lomi Lomi into Europe. As far as I know, I was the first one to take it to Europe. May have been one person in Denmark that was slightly about the same time. And I organized Abraham's first workshops in the UK. So because it was so new, I happened to be at this place where there a group of Dutch people came in, and they were all excited about hearing about this. And one person had a session, and then pretty much everybody wanted a session. So I ended up working on many, many people over the whole weekend and basically didn't sleep for 48 hours. I had breaks in between people and drinks and bits and pieces. Basically didn't sleep and did nearly 40 sessions, and these are 2-hour sessions through the weekend, 3 days it probably was. And then I got invited to the Netherlands to work there, and again did a whole lot of sessions in about 10 days. So it was really intense. And then one day I was working in London, and this girl from Wales came, and we started doing a session. I was only expecting 2 hours, and 36 hours later, we were just winding down.
My goodness.
Non-stop. And this is like playing a game of squash for 36 hours non-stop. It's very dynamic, a lot of moving, lifting, twisting, all sorts of things. And and a friend that lived in the house looked in because she was wondering what was going on. And she said, we were floating a few inches off the floor.
My goodness.
I wasn't aware of that, but she said that's what she saw.
Mm-hmm.
That we were levitating off the floor. And energy was that intense.
Goodness me. I'd love to see a session in action. Is that on one of the YouTube videos, or is there any way that we can see?
Well, there is a bodywork system that's Kahuna massage, it's called in Australia, which is a bit of a misnomer.
Mm-hmm.
But as a brand, it works okay. But there are people doing Kahuna bodywork in Australia.
Okay.
It would never be called that in Hawaii, and it's never been called that in Hawaii. The girl that started that in Australia was taught by a Maori guy in Denmark who was trained by Abraham at the same time I was. So it's a student of a student that's done this, created this. So yeah, there are people that are doing it, but those are the things that are possible. And that goes into the being totally present. Now is the moment of power, not thinking, goodness, I've been going 12 hours and I should be tired by now. Just totally out of that way of thinking and totally focused, because all of the training is about being totally present for the person on the table and responding to their needs. And it takes someone that can receive that, to actually do a session like that. So everything just clicked on that occasion. I was in the right place, she was in the right place, and it just flowed.
Mm.
So now is the moment of power.
Obviously meant to be.
It happened. But, and yeah, that energy flows or attention go if you're thinking about it or you're just in that state. Like when I came back from Glastonbury one evening from doing a weekend of bodywork, I hit London at about 5 o'clock in the evening, the height of rush hour, and I drove right through the centre of London from one side to the other, from near Twickenham, where the football stadium is, right across to Hackney in half an hour, right through the middle of rush hour traffic, right across London Tower Bridge in the centre of London, which is
unheard of. You're usually stuck at one roundabout for an hour.
Yeah, even back in 1990, this would have been unheard of. But I just didn't stop to think about traffic. I was just focused on being home, and I was in that flow. And that brings us to the fifth principle that we work with is aloha. And that means to love is to be happy with. And so how we might describe that is as love increases as judgment decreases.
Okay. It's more recognized in Western culture as hello, isn't it? You get off the plane in Hawaii and it's...
Yeah, it literally means love.
Beautiful.
And a deeper translation of it is the joyful sharing of life energy in the present. So they really understood what love was. So they greeted each other with love and they farewelled each other with love. And a group greeting might be aloha kako. And that means love to everyone, including me. So it's not a one-way street.
It's a very nice greeting.
Yeah. And aloha also understands, there's got different levels. So a big part of aloha is tolerance, giving people permission to be who they are and do what they do without judging them to be right or wrong, good or bad. But that doesn't mean we accept bad behavior from people. If it's not reciprocated, it's that person's vanished, basically. Or treated held at a distance more than being welcomed. So there is that, part of aloha is that behavior is not tolerated. If it doesn't change, it goes away. So it's not unconditional.
I actually like that. That makes a lot of sense because I think in this esoteric world of love and light, it's we're supposed to accept all and sundry. And when we do that, especially accepting dark or negative energy into our field, it just, causes such disarray.
It does. But again, we don't define energy as good or bad, dark or light. Energy is energy. It means movement. And everything is in movement. So we would say good or bad behavior, but we don't judge that as, and good and bad are value judgments. So it depends on what we think good and bad is. So the world is what you think it is and how you react to it. When you get into that aloha state, we can observe people behaving in ways that we would not choose to ourselves without getting an anger response to it or a fear response to it. And anger is largely based on fear in the first place. So we don't have to have those emotional reactions to seeing things that are happening. We have a technique called so what.
So what?
Yeah. Well, that person's doing that over there to that person over there, Is that affecting me? They've got free will to create the experience they're creating because only the things that we will resonate with can affect us. And as shaman, we're aware of those things because we want to send harmonizing ideas and thoughts and images into those situations to have a beneficial effect. We're not trying to control their behavior. That doesn't work. We're trying to increase the influence of aloha and their behavior and decision making. And that's completely their choice to take that or not. So going back to healing, when we offer healing do a symbolic or dream weaving, or we have all of the like soul retrieval and things like that in the tradition. And when we do things like that, it's offered as a gift for the person to accept or reject. So it's not we don't have to ask permission or anything. If we become aware of a need, we can do something that they can accept or reject.
Yeah.
So it's offered as a gift.
Yeah.
It's never forced. And it's never judged as, oh, you're in a bad state and that's your fault and I'm going to heal you. That doesn't happen in this way of thinking. Sixth principle, all power comes from within. Mana, concept of mana. Now, a lot of people think mana is energy because it rhymes with prana and various other things, but it's not. It's influence. So it's the effective use of energy to create a beneficial effect or to help encourage a beneficial effect.
What would be a good example of that?
All power comes from within, and so all healing comes from within. So when I did Lomi Lomi for the girl in Denmark who had breast cancer, I didn't heal her breast cancer. I provided an environment in which she could heal her own breast cancer. And that came about through, for a session, we'll ask, what do you want from this? We don't prejudge what a person needs or tell them what they need. We ask, what do you want from this? And she made some very, very clear decisions about relationships that she'd been in and wanted for the future. Very clear. And I worked on her for about 3.5 hours, maybe a bit more, I'm not sure. And at the end of that session, that tumor was gone. Now, I didn't heal her. She healed herself. I just provided an environment of aloha and a high energy state that helped her change it quickly. She did it herself. All healing comes from within.
Of the 7 principles, the basic assumptions of Huna, as you're sharing with us, all power comes from within, to me, is the ultimate acknowledgement of the self.
Yes.
That we have unfortunately been separated from in this modern culture.
And I wrote an article about ego and our modern use of ego. We don't try and cut part of us out and throw it away. We expand our awareness to include all of us, our infinite self. So, but when you're constantly battling yourself and behaviors that you're blaming on a part of yourself, constantly battling with that, it builds up so much tension. I've known people suicide from it, and that's very, very sad to see. But it comes from a mistranslation of some Eastern concepts and the way Freud used the word. But ego, he used it as an element of the mind, whereas in Latin it's a word that simply means self. So in this way of thinking, we expand that sense of self to include all of us without creating that separation that a lot of the Western thinking tends to do.
Yes, I think ego has been more presented as a form of narcissism, as a level of narcissism, rather than the whole of the self. Or
and people mix up ego with egotism. Egotism is that inflated self-importance and creating that separation. I'm better than you because I think this way and do this. They're free to think any way they want to, but it's not very effective. Yeah, and effectiveness, the 7th principle is pono. Effectiveness is the measure of truth. And that doesn't mean the outcome, the means, outcome justifies the means. It means how we use it as the means determines the outcome. So if you want quiet, you can use violent means to get quiet. And that's only ever temporary. But if you want peace, you need to use peaceful means in order to get that. So we're always going through this cycle, are we getting the results out of life that we want? Are we experiencing what we want to? If we're not, that means that what we're thinking is not effective. So we go back to the beginning. What are we thinking about this? How can we refine this to have better thinking? We can do that because there are no limits and we can change in any which way we want to. We do that with our focus. We do that now. We do that with love. We use our power to do that as what we're doing now, effective. So that's how and the first four principles that we talk about are principles. And the last three are behaviors.
With the seventh principle, effectiveness is the measure of truth, is that based heavily on your own belief systems?
Well, everything's based on your own belief systems. The only proof of anything is your own personal belief in it.
Because I feel like somebody might say, oh, I want to be a financially successful business person in this particular field, and they work hard and they keep their focus and they commit to it every day doing something, but it doesn't happen, it doesn't evolve, it doesn't open up. And you might find, for example, that the reasoning behind that is because of a lack of self-worth or a lack of self-belief or how that person may perceive money. There might be money blocks. There might be issues associated with that. So how do in terms of effectiveness being the measure of truth in a situation like that, for example?
Well, there's a good example of that. A story from the 1960s. There was a very successful advertising executive earning a lot of money, but she was always short of rent at the end of the month. Back then she was earning like $100,000 a year, which is a lot of income, especially back then. But a catchphrase in business back then was "time is money, time is money, time is money." So it was a mantra. But she was also saying, "Oh, I never have enough time. I never have enough time. I'm always short of time. I'm always too busy. I'm always..." And ku, which is the body mind in the Hawaiian, we use that word ku as the body mind, physical part of us, uses an associative logic, not a linear logic. And so ku says, oh, time is money. If I never have enough time, I can't have enough money either. So she'd be walking down the street and see $1,000 dress in the window. So she had a wardrobe full of impulse buys, many of which she'd never worn. But once she got this thinking straightened out and made that separation, understanding that time is money fits this context, but never have enough time doesn't connect, then she stopped the impulse buying and started to accumulate and have plenty of money to pay the rent and everything else she wanted. And those are the kinds of belief complexes that we work with people. And they can be many layers of them, but we have to work out what's going to work for that individual, because one technique isn't going to work for everybody, for every situation. So we teach lots of techniques that people can learn to use for themselves.
Okay.
So they don't have to keep coming to see us. They can say, I have this skill, and they build out that confidence.
So this leads beautifully, Graeme, into how people can get in touch or experience this technique. The best way would be through your website?
Well, yes, we have two main websites. My website is hunahawaii.com. And the main Huna International website is huna.org. And there's a calendar on huna.org. And there is an article library with over 600 articles. And there are links there to the video library on YouTube, which is free for everyone to access, 500 videos on a lot of this stuff. The specific ones on the 7 principles and the 3 aspects of self that we work with. We have ku, lono, and amakua. So, and those are not separate parts, but they are functions within the one. So we have the conscious mind, body mind, and the spirit mind.
So people can learn more about Huna Kapua, but if they wanted a session per se, must it be in person?
No.
So it can be done via Zoom.
People can contact me directly through Facebook or through my website, hunahawaii.com.
hunahawaii.com. That's HUNA Hawaii.com.
Yeah, just one word.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so if anyone's interested in workshops or anything like that, we do have an Alakaʻi living in Tasmania who is a very good teacher. And we have a weekly book group. So we go through at the moment we're going through a teaching story called Dangerous Journeys, which teaches a lot of the techniques that we would use. So there'd be time travel, there's astral travel, there's remote viewing, all of those things, developing the psychic skills in the healings. And that's one of the specifics about what a shaman is. A shaman is an active healer using the powers of nature and the mind primarily. And that's the distinction, is using the mind more than taking a pill or a vitamin to have a physical effect.
So someone can learn this through your teaching?
Certainly make contact. I'm teaching a workshop, the Advanced Shaman workshop in Hawaii with a colleague in January, and there are still spaces open for that. I expect to increase the frequency of workshops. Serge himself doesn't teach anymore in person. Susan Floyd, who teaches the Lomi Lomi in Europe and all around, we're doing the shaman training workshops now that Serge used to teach. And we have to expand those around the world again. Obviously, with the last 5 years have been a bit disrupted and things have shut down quite a bit. So,
well, it sounds like a wonderful excuse to go to Hawaii. Before we go, I always ask one question of everybody. If I could ask you, what would your one message be for the world right now?
Bless the present, trust yourself, expect the best.
That's a beautiful message.
We tend to get what we expect to get. So if we cultivate positive expectations, we're going to get more of that. If we focus on the good of everything that's happening now, and there's a lot of people are focused on bad things that are happening, but there's an awful lot of good happening in the world. And if we focus on that, we put our energy into it, we increase that, certainly our experience of it at least. And that helps here, and when we help ourselves, we help the whole.
And I think that's a beautiful place to end our session here today. Graeme Kapono Urlich, thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, your knowledge. It is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much.
Mahalo, mahalo nui loa.
Mahalo to you too.
And that means thank you very much in narrow terms, but in wider terms, mahalo is a deep state of gratitude and connection.
Thank you, Graeme. Mahalo.
Thank you. Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you so much for being here and tuning into Enlightened Connections. I truly hope today's episode offered you something to reflect on, expand into, or feel more deeply connected to, whether within yourself or with the animals and spirit world around you. If you enjoyed this conversation, please follow or subscribe to the show and share it with someone you feel may benefit from it as well. It's one of the most supportive ways you can help this podcast reach more hearts, more homes, and more animal lovers. And if you'd like to stay connected in between episodes, come join me inside the Enlightened Connections podcast Facebook community. I'd absolutely love to have you there. Until next time, take gentle care, stay connected, and trust the whispers.